Hi, listeners. Before we get into this episode, something happened with the Riverside recording platform, and in some parts for Jack and I, there's a slight echo that unfortunately they've not been able to resolve. We've been through a couple of rounds with technical support. It's not too bad. I've had a listen, but we're not deaf to the fact that you can hear a very slight echo in some points. So just putting that in early, but hopefully it doesn't get in the way of listening to our usual ramblings. Now, for today's episode, we recapped on some of the crowdfunding discussion from last episode because that really got quite a few conversations happening in the ecosystem. We talked about the Startup Daily Awards that have opened for applications. We talked about accelerators and a new accelerator that's launched in Sydney called Build Club. And we just talked about accelerators in general. And then we got onto this theme of there's a few different articles under the banner of VCs either being too conservative, being too risk adverse, being too biased, being too stupid, and being too lazy. So there were a number of articles that we took that we unpacked that thread and we had a little bit of fun with that. And of course, finished with a eclectic random collection of charts that it would seem are designed to almost add as little value to you as possible. I think there are a few in there that will make for some interesting dinner party discussions. All right, well, we'll get into it. How are we this morning?
I was saying to Jack, I'm feeling so much better. Nothing like coming off a sickness to make you feel good.
You sound better.
Yeah.
Good with the schedule?
Yeah.
There's a few little Easter eggs that I've got in there that I'm going to pull
Easter eggs
out.
or landmines?
Yeah, this episode, there probably is a few landmines, actually.
Yeah. What about you boys?
Yeah, my foot's good. Yeah, I'll be back hopefully next week. We had another big win on the weekend. It wasn't a 70-point win this week. It was a 115-0.
Bullshit. Jack.
God, how bad is that? It's bad for everyone. It's not fun for anyone.
What if you just
You're
calculate?
playing under threes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it
What
wasn't good.
What is the maximum score you could get in a game of rugby? Like
Yeah,
just with the
is there
minimum
enough
time
time?
required.
Yeah, but I was still good afterwards. They stuck around and had a few beers with us. It was all good.
Did you at least shout them some beers afterwards?
Yeah, and they were giving out, how's this? You can edit this out, but they were giving out their best player got $250. Their second best player got $125. We don't get any money. We absolutely flogged them and they get paid money, like cash.
Oh,
That's-
I'm sure there's some analogy in there for founded life.
Yeah.
Sounds like government funding going to VCs while the good ones don't get it.
Nah. Salty.
I was hoping for a quick episode with minimal editing today.
And Don, how was the last few days in Fiji?
Yeah, thank you for a number of you that reached out. I spoke with a couple. Is everything all right? There's no episode this week. And we did try, but the internet in Fiji just seems to be problematic. But I also think that the universe has got our back because Aaron was running late. I was like a couple of double cocktails down on an empty stomach and was getting, I think it would be fair to say, pretty lippy.
There were a lot of misspoken words, as I recall, but
More than usual.
more than usual.
There was a few rants where I probably went further than normally. So we might leave Elon out of it today.
Yes.
But that was really good, Jack. Great place. Kids had an absolute ball. The Fijians provide a constant lesson that there is a big difference between standard of living and quality of life. And out in those islands, the quality of life, you don't want to sugarcoat it too much. There are definitely some standard of living aspects that need to be improved around healthcare and education. And from when I was last there, you can see some improvements because Fiji's had amazing boon in tourism brings the dollars. But those people, they're just, their community aspect, their love for children, their singing and dancing just as a core part of everyday life, the joy that they show, their quality of life leaves a lot of people that have very high standards of living for dead. And in my consulting life, I consulted to people that often find themselves on lists and a lot of them have everything and are fucking miserable.
It's so true. That was my experience with Fiji. And there's nothing like Fiji time.
Yeah, that you've got to get used to. How do you know there's an American 2 hours away? You can hear them. But I tell you, watching Americans have to get used to Fiji time. Aussies are bad enough.
Yeah.
There are a couple of times where I'm like, this is interesting. But by the end of it, you just laugh it off. But anyway, it didn't take long to insult a group of people.
No, what are we, a couple of minutes in? We've already landed a few.
No, so it was good. I've got a little blog actually that I've written just on the difference between quality of life and standard of living. And the quality of life at the end of the day comes down to the quality of relationships, health, all of those things, the stuff that you can't really buy.
So true. So true.
But let's make money.
It is a good reminder for founders like that. I don't want to use the word balance, and it is part of the focus of this Friday. Like at the offsite, we combine personal and business. And a lot of this is understanding self and understanding your motivators and why you behave the way you behave. And I don't know, there's something about you go and visit other cultures. A similar experience in Mongolia. Like you look at these individuals who just found it's like they've cracked the code to happiness, but no, they just never fucked up the code to happiness.
Yeah.
But yeah, lots of lessons there. I'm looking forward to the blog.
Remember Dr. Geo on that podcast that we listened to a number of times?
Yeah.
For the things that you're passionate about, behave like it's life and death, while simultaneously understanding that nothing matters at all. Yes, standard of living is important to a threshold, and life is a lot easier when you're not concerned about certain things, when you have your health, when you have access to those aspects. But quality of life comes down to relationships. It comes down to being able to do things that you're really passionate about. That's how some people use the word balance of taking all this time off and you go and contemplate your navel and do nothing. You can still work your ass off and have a very high quality of life as long as you've still got relationships, as long as you're not an animatronic stuck on the wheel that you don't actually want to be on. So don't confuse these things of not working hard. That's not what that's not what it's about.
Yeah, 100%.
But people listening to this podcast, if they were looking for stuff that was too serious, they would have stopped listening.
I don't think we attract the ones that are too serious.
Let's recap. So thank you to everybody that a couple of weeks ago we had asked for some testimonials to submit as part of a bit of a campaign we're doing. And we got some quite humbling, really. Just we enjoy sharing and hopefully there's some value added. And it turns out there is.
Yeah, it was great feedback, like really positive. And yeah, just amazed that people find value in listening, but there you go.
Because we talk this shit anyway, even if we weren't recording. So no skin off our nose.
Yeah.
Then to recap, in that last episode, one of the big items we talked about was crowdfunding and some criticism that had come from the VC community. That sort of stirred a bit of a hornet's nest. In that episode, we had referred to some comments that Chris Gillings had made as part of that article. And we then caught up with Chris subsequent to that, and he just wanted to clarify some stuff. And he agrees that there's absolutely a role to play in crowdfunding platforms. He absolutely agreed with a number of the things that we were discussed. But what he maintains is that given anyone can invest in them, so retail investors, many that may not have money to lose, these platforms have probably a stronger obligation to err on the side of over-disclosure and transparency. I think the more money you have to lose and losing money affects you less, there's probably more risk that can be taken. So all he's saying is he wants to see companies err on the side of caution. He himself has, as he said to us, invested in crowdfunding campaigns in the US. He loves the idea of getting more companies supported via it, but they just need to be protected. That's the gist of it. Matt from Birchall is going to come on and do a Founder Focus episode on the 28th of May. I need to put that in your diaries. Sorry. That was agreed while I was in Fiji. And then Chris is also going to come on once the next Cut Through Ventures report is ready. And we'll talk through the Cut Through Ventures data, which I think is really important for the ecosystem.
Yeah, totally agree. I really liked Chris's response. And I'm conscious in that last podcast, I did make a few comments about Chris's comments. A huge fan of the report. And I think, yeah, just going through his comments, like really well thought out and considered. Really looking forward to having Chris on the podcast. And I'd like to make that a regular. If Chris came on and actually went through the report each quarter, that'd be bloody awesome.
Yeah. The work they do for the ecosystem, I think, is really valuable. And then after that episode, I've spent a little bit of time on the Birchall site. And then a couple of companies that I'm invested in have actually either raised or are raising on Birchall. Recycle Smart is a Brisbane Angels investment that we did probably a couple of years ago. And I remember the founders pitch, high energy, a lot of engagement in the room. And we put money in an article by Eloise Keating of Smart Company. They've just raised 1.15 million on the virtual platform. And like 1.15 million in the context of this phase of the life cycle and angel groups is actually a sizable number. And for virtual by themselves to be pulling deals above $1 million, Matt and the team there have done an amazing job of getting investors on board.
Yeah, no, they've done a fantastic job. And I shared with you boys that I invested through a equity crowdfunding round into Black Ops Growing. And this conversation about opaqueness, like for me as a shareholder through that, and I invested because I knew one of the founders really well, like Dan, and I'd been tracking them for a long time. But so I would have invested independent of it being on a crowdfunding platform. I should make that point too. But yeah, it was through reading posts on social media, I found out the company was going to liquidation. And then a week ago, I saw a news article pop up that they'd been essentially acquired, or a group of current investors had come together to do a buyout. And none of that came from the company. Definitely none of it came from the investment platform. And so for me, like this conversation, it's not just distinct to equity-based crowdfunding. We see it, yeah, even in our portfolio chasing updates, sometimes it's really difficult to get the information we want to see.
I think maybe to Chris's point, this is where it's important, either around disclosures or knowing what you're investing in. My understanding, and I look forward to, if I'm wrong, happy to change that understanding. But my understanding is once you put money into a company through equity crowdfunding, thank you, mother for the rabbit, that's it. Their job and their role is done. There's no post-investment management. There's no accountability. There's no following up on anything else that firms like us and others in the ecosystem, part of what we're being paid for is that follow-up, post-investment support, accountability, reporting. My understanding is that just ain't going to happen, because a number of the companies that I've seen raise on crowdfunding platforms that raised 800 or 900 million that are now either in trouble or no longer here, they've burned through the money. My understanding is you're at the mercy of whatever the founder's willing to do and report, and the platform itself ain't there to try and hold things to account. And as you've just pointed out there, you found yourself in that situation.
Yeah, that's
Don,
my understanding.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to ask, what is the fee structure? Do they have a typical upfront management fee and then a trailing?
So my understanding, and we'll need to confirm this, but I think I've seen that most of them take like 6% upfront, but no trailing.
Yeah.
Some other platforms may have some carry. So there's probably a lot of work, but they're charging fees not dissimilar to the syndicators, but without having to do any of the future work.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there are some companies some people that I've spoken to have said, they're making a killing. Actually, because Birchall did their own raise, you can actually see what Birchall's revenues and costs and whatever else. They're like any other business, right? They've got a hefty cost structure to manage compliance and sales and marketing and all of that kind of stuff. They're not at this point in time just swimming in rivers of cash. So they are working hard for their dollars. But Matt can clarify that.
Yeah, the ones I've seen and invested through and seen companies on, it either the investor pays the fee and it's just a upfront, no trailing or carry, or the portco, the company pays a percentage of capital raised. So whichever way they take it from, it's essentially the same.
And it's important that there are fees for service. If you pay peanuts, you're going to get monkeys.
Yeah,
I won't pull on that thread any further. And another one of my companies I'm invested in, FOMOX, which was actually called Virtual Jeff. It's now started a raise on Virtual. It was one of my earliest investments that I just invested based on the founder's pitch. Like, it was the most engaging pitch I've ever seen, had the whole room enthralled. And then some other companies and this is where I agree with Chris Gillings on many things. And then on some others, I agree, but I don't know how we disclose our way out of whether an investment's going to be good or not, because what is a good investment to us could be a poor investment to others. And there's quite a lot of stuff in the cannabis space coming through on these platforms. I've actually had a look at a number of cannabis products, cannabis growers. And the challenge is that ultimately, whilst it's a new market and legalization, and there's this big sort of strong vibe of this is a big growth market. What was John Hempton's line in that podcast, Jack. Never, well, it was commodity products subject to competition, the marginal profit always goes to zero. And so the problem with these cannabis from a growing point of view is just a raw material. There's nothing really fancy about it. And then it's all about the value add. And the value add is where some of the margin comes. But in a world of so much competition now, being able to create a brand and the value add that provides a competitive moat. Like we're just seeing these companies that are very good at raising money and creating a story, but they can't create a durable product. So for me, I look at the whole sector and say, like, this is going to be another bloodbath of capital going into low margin things that investors don't get a return on. But I could be wrong. And so we got to be careful not to say just because a certain subset of investors think it's too risky in a shitty business that people shouldn't be allowed to invest.
But that's such a good point about some of these criticisms that have been hurled at equity crowdfunding. They're equally applicable to VC, to PE. We have a massive information asymmetry, and one VC fund's great deal is we may never touch. We just don't see it, as in we don't see the value of what they're investing in. And it's also that point, Jack, we talk about this a lot, but you look at the ones that you think are going to do great and inevitably they're still a bloody hard slog and right on the precipice of failure at any given moment. And often it's the ones you don't think are going to win that end up getting up, and time will tell. This is a long horizon game. And so
there's a company on here that might be right up my alley. It's called Good and Fugly. 25% of produce never leaves the farm because it's not pretty enough.
all sorts of metaphors in that.
I leave my farm all the time. Anyway, I personally think that equity crowdfunding with the momentum it's got is going to keep all early stage investors on their toes.
Yep.
To have a value proposition to attract founders. Now, as Recycle Smart has just demonstrated, if you can go to equity crowdfunding, pull $1 million, I'm sure there's still quite a lot of effort that goes into it. Why would you go and fuck around with the bullshit of all the DD professional investors do, especially if you can get this is a generalization, it may be wrong, but one of the challenges that I know the professional investment market has with equity crowdfunding is that valuations are often not market. So let's say that's even partly true. If you can get a better valuation and a higher number than you would raise from angels, have got a whole lot of competition coming.
Yep, totally agree.
So we'll see where that takes us. All right, let's jump in. We might start. This bit isn't actually news. I just thought that it was just a good little video because I think it's important for founders and probably investors. I think there are some parts of the world and some parts of the ecosystem that might be losing their sense of humor a bit and taking things a little bit too seriously. And I thought Jerry's comment.
Reach across a couple of generations here to tell you the most important thing I am confident that I know about life. I'm 70. I'm done. You are just starting. I only want to help you. The slightly uncomfortable feeling of awkward humor is okay. It's not something you need to fix. I totally admire the ambitions of your generation to create a more just and inclusive society. I think it is also wonderful that you care so much about not hurting other people's feelings. In the 1,000,001 ways, we all do that every second of every day. It's lovely to want to fix those things, but all caps, but what I need to tell you as a comedian, do not lose your sense of humor. You can have no idea at this point in your life how much you are going to need it to get through. Not enough of life makes sense for you to be able to survive it without humor. And I know all of you here are going to use all of your brains and muscle and soul to improve the world. And I know you're going to do a bang up job. And when you're done, as I am now, I bet the world, because of you, will be a much better place. But it will still not make a whole hell of a lot of sense. It'll be a better, different, but still pretty insane mess. And it is worth the sacrifice of an occasional discomfort to have some laughs. Don't lose that. Even if it's at the cost of occasional hard feelings, it's okay. You gotta laugh. That is the one thing at the end of your life you will not wish you did less of. Humor is the most powerful, most survival, essential quality you will ever have or need to navigate through the human experience.
On point. Can we acknowledge Jerry Seinfeld at 70 looks bloody amazing?
He looks younger than me at 41.
Like, well, when he said that, I had to Google it to make sure he wasn't just making a joke about himself. He's actually 70.
And look, is that all that relevant? Maybe not, but the founder journey is hard. Even investing is hard because we have to watch the roller coaster, and it can be painful watching founders go through difficult times. But I think the thing there is do your best to not lose your sense of humor and try and find some value out of it.
I think his line, better, different, but still an insane mess. Isn't that founder journey? Like you land a customer, it feels better, it's now different, and it's still an insane mess. You let close a round, it's like exactly the same. I think it's great advice.
Hi, Don, you're on mute.
Probably for the best, Jack. So anyway, I just set the scene of especially some of the areas that we might get to. Now, another person with a tremendous sense of humor that tends to never lose his sense of humor is Simon Thompson of Startup Daily, Tomo. And a couple of things. Did you see he did a great summary of everything in the budget for the startup ecosystem?
This was some of Tomo's best writing ever. So if you're a listener, you missed it. Basically, he published this post, the summary of the budget for the tech and innovation scene, open it up, and it was just a picture with, what was it, one line? And it just said, see you next year.
Yes, it's like,
because there was nothing in the budget for us.
it's Oliver holding up the bowl. Slight segue. Went to an all-boys school. I played Nancy in Oliver in grade 7. Distinctly remember getting into an argument with my mother that my skirt wasn't short enough. Putting that aside, it's Oliver, and Tomo says, thanks for reading, see you next year. Because there was literally fuck all.
I have so many follow-up questions.
Please, Aaron.
So much of your personality now makes sense, Doc.
The reason I got cast in that as Nancy was the year prior, I played another female lead called Rhonda Roll in a rock and roll 60s musical and left. So I got typecast pretty quick.
Oh, the therapy is well spent.
Yeah. I thought that was a good bit of humor. And then from Tomo as well, the 2024 Startup Daily Best in Tech Awards is now open with nominations closing on Monday the 10th. And so we'll put the link to that in the show notes, but there's Scale Up of the Year, Startup of the Year, Best Regional Startup, Most Innovative Startup, Best Startup Culture, Industry Champion, Best Sustainability Startup, Best New Idea, Best Technical Leader, Best New Founder, Best GSD Award, we'll work out that in a minute, Future Leader of the Year, AI Game Changer, Startup Investor of the Year, and Startup Event of the Year. Given there were so many award categories, I'm just a little upset that there wasn't like worst podcast by a VC category or something like that we've thrown our hat in the ring for.
Yeah. Oh, there should be a podcast category. Tomo, if it's not too late, please add one.
Our GSD award is Getting Shit Done Award.
Get shit done.
This is an industry impact for an organization or individual honoring their contribution to the overall success of the tech ecosystem. Cool.
Oh, so get shit for the ecosystem. Got it. That's interesting.
You come to mind there. Get your awards in.
Yeah, start nominating.
Just to segue to someone who's getting shit done in the ecosystem, we could talk about the Build Club, which we've been chatting internally about from the article.
Yeah, so Capital Brief, an article by Hugo Mathers, how Build Club is built different to fix broken accelerator models. Annie Lau's Build Club program for Australian AI startups kicks off this week. So keep in mind that this was on the 10th of May, so a couple of weeks ago. But she's keen to steer clear of traditional accelerator tropes. Did you get a chance to have a look at that?
Yeah. This is where my jadedness of being in the ecosystem a long time comes out, where I feel like there's always this pattern of we need a new accelerator model and invent something new, and accelerators are broken, and repeating something that's been done a long time ago. But outside of that cynicism, it is really good to see new programs launching, and particularly this one being focused on like technical founders, I think is really healthy. It'll be really interesting to see what comes out of this. And from memory, it had a AI focus. Was that right?
Yeah. So the article says that Lau, who quit a VC job at Aurora Ventures last year to build a Sydney hub for AI founders, has whittled down the attending startups from 156 applicants. She said the cohort will include breakaway alumni from the likes of Google, Eucalyptus, and Canva. And one of the founders has been accepted into the Silicon Valley's prestigious program Y Combinator later this year. Her focus is on technical founders, even if they are a one-person startup. It's another way she's diverging from the mold. The article also said I think the best founders don't need an accelerator where they're matched with a co-founder and then have to go through 10 workshops in the first week. I think the best founders know how to figure things out by themselves and are super ambitious.
I love
think
that
that's-
line.
Yeah, totally agree with those points. The best founders always find a way and they just get shit done. They get it done.
I don't think accelerators are all that effective in getting from 0 to 1.
No.
If a founder can't work that shit out, that's a systemic problem that's not fixable in my humble opinion. Can an accelerator help you get from 1 to 2 and get you on a different course or speed up growth? Probably, but yeah, I really like that line.
Yeah, I love that line. And I totally agree with you. Like, I think it should be hard to make you work for it in some ways in that early 0 to 1. And I don't think you can just solve for it. And I don't think you can outsource it. And so I think for founders, I'm a huge fan of accelerators in sense of a good accelerator does add value, but there's a lot of accelerators that in my view don't add value. And I think for founders, making sure you do your homework when you're looking at a program, understand what specifically are you looking to get out of it, making sure the program that you're entering can help you achieve that, not just chasing the capital that it offers, because a lot of programs do offer investment capital and founders can maybe somewhat naively think, well, that's a great way to get easy capital as opposed to going out and going around, but making sure you're looking at the value beyond that. And not all programs are created equal. So find the one that's a fit.
Yeah, programs that do bring investment, I've seen the terms of that investment that then turns into a shareholders agreement screw up the ability to raise future rounds.
Oh, completely.
Like, just unreasonable.
Yeah, and heaps of them are disguised where they put the capital in, but then charge it back in fees for the program, or the terms are pretty horrendous. So being very careful. Speak to as many alumni who've been through those programs. And if it's a first-time program, speak to those who have worked with the people behind the program before.
Yeah, I think the takeaway for founders, don't do an accelerator for the capital. There has to be a value add, and a good accelerator will give a heap of value add. So if you're going in there with a different mindset, you're just going to ruin your cap table.
Totally agree.
The article said they have to be able to code, she says. I think before people were like, you need domain expertise and a non-technical founder. I'm a bit contrarian, but I think business skills are a lot easier to pick up for technical founders as opposed to a business founder trying to learn technical skills. So that's why I'm quite bullish on technical people. There's a few things I want to unpack with that sentence. We've spoken about it multiple times. We're believers in complementary teams, and being a sole founder is hard because you've got to produce, administrate, entrepreneur, integrate. You've got to have the 4 ingredients, and they're just really hard to do at any one level. That's why complementary teams who can take the different PAEI ingredients. Now, nothing in life comes for free. So if you are going to have multi-founder teams, one of the things that comes with is conflict. So you've got to choose almost your poison a little bit. Are you going to try and go it alone, which statistically is hard? And as we talked about in one of the episodes, unicorns tend to come from multi-founder teams, not always. Where sole founders make great success, it's because they're able to commandeer through either ESOP or wages the resources to take on those ingredients. It's not impossible. It's just a bit harder. But I'm of a mind that it's actually complementary team of having both. But the line there, they need to be able to code. Well, they actually need to be able to sell. There is a shitload of interesting, great products, technically, I'm sure, that never see the light of day because a technical person sitting there banging away at a keyboard doesn't know how to sell, doesn't like selling, whatever it might be. So I have just a question mark around that, because if products sold themselves, our world would be a shitload easier.
I completely agree with you there. Like, I think, yes, business skills and knowledge are easy to acquire in the sense that there's no shortage of information on what and how, but the ability to actually do it is very different, and the ability to sell. Whereas I think technical skills, being able to hire that in to build a complementary team, I view as slightly easier. And like Luke Anir, not a technical founder. He openly says he wasn't technical. Mel Perkins wasn't technical. There's enough proof points to show that it's not just sufficient to be a technical founder, but rather you have to have that complementary team.
Even in the last episode, we talked about with Scott Farquhar stepping down and some of the comments of Luke, and clearly complementary team there. And one of the other things I just wonder with the accelerator model and new ones coming out, it feels like we're on the cusp of a big change and it's like the last of the old way of doing things. Maybe I could be wrong.
No, I agree with you there. Like her line, they need to be able to code. I disagree with that in the sense of, like Jensen, CEO of NVIDIA, came out just recently and said, we've got to stop beating this drum of STEM and coding skills. Coding is dead. We have ChatGPT, we have other AI programs down. Even my kids, I bought them all Arduino kits, and on the weekend while they were all sick, they just went on ChatGPT, got all this code, built these circuits. Now they've got things in their room that have motion sensors that show on an LCD display. If someone walks in the room, it says get lost, and they built all these things. It's like,
Really?
yeah, just ChatGPT. Their speed of learning is phenomenal. Do they actually understand every line of code? Probably not. But do they need to? So I think this sentiment of everyone needs to know how to code, I think that's dead. I think that's a bygone era.
I think I think that is true, but also advice, especially at the early stage, I think is going to become ubiquitous, free and cheap. So a little thing that I found that I thought was relevant, let me just share my screen here. This is a post from Ruben D, but it's taking a video from Sam Altman, and Sam creates a basic accelerator. What's an accelerator? It's giving you advice on how to go and do stuff. But Sam creates a basic little GPT to give advice as if it was Sam. So I'll just play this.
We've made it so that you can program the GPT just by having a conversation. We believe that natural language is going to be a big part of how people use computers in the future. And we think this is an interesting early example. So I'd like to show you how to build one. All right. So I want to create a GPT that helps give founders and developers advice when starting new projects. I'm going to go to create a GPT here, and this drops me into the GPT builder. I worked with founders for years at YC, and still, whenever I meet developers, the questions I get are always about, how do I think about a business idea? Can you give me some advice? I'm going to see if I can build a GPT to help with that. To start, GPT Builder asks me what I want to make. And I'm going to say, I want to help startup founders think through their business ideas and get advice. After the founder has gotten some advice, grill them on why they are not growing faster. All right. So to start off, I just tell the GPT a little bit about what I want here. And it's going to go off and start thinking about that. And it's going to write some detailed instructions for the GPT. It's also going to, ask me about a name. How do I feel about Startup Mentor? That's fine. So if I didn't like the name, of course, I could call it something else, but it's going to try to have this conversation with me and start there. And you can see here on the right in the preview mode that it's already starting to fill out the GPT, where it says what it does. It has some ideas of additional questions that I could ask. And you know what? So it just generated a candidate. Of course, I could regenerate that or change it, but I like that. So I will say, that's great. And you see now that the GPT is being built out a little bit more as we go. Now, what I want this to do, how it can interact with users, I could talk about style here. But what I'm going to say is I am going to upload transcripts of some lectures about startups I have given. Please give advice based off of those. So now it's going to go figure out how to do that. And I would like to show you the configure tab. So you can see some of the things that were built out here as we were going by the builder itself. And you can see that there's capabilities here that I can enable. I could add custom actions. These are all fine to leave. I'm going to upload a file. So here is a lecture that I picked that I gave with some startup advice. And I'm going to add that here. In terms of these questions, this is a dumb one. The rest of those are reasonable and very much things founders often ask. I'm going to add one more thing to the instructions here, which is be concise and constructive with feedback. Again, if we had more time, I'd show you a bunch of other things, but this is like a decent start. And now we can try it out over on this preview tab. So I will say, what's a common question? What are three things to look for when hiring employees at an early stage startup? Now it's going to look at that document I uploaded. It'll also have, of course, all of the background knowledge of GPT-4. That's pretty good. Those are three things that I definitely have said many times. Now we could go on and it would start following the other instructions and grill me on why I'm not growing faster. But in the interest of time, I'm going to skip that. I'm going to publish this only to me for now. I can work on it later. I can add more content. I can see options that I think would be useful. And then I can share it publicly. So that's what it looks like to create a GPT.
It's a brave new world.
And as he was going through that, I was thinking, imagine if we recorded every session during our London mission and then turned that into a GPT that you could actually ask about UK expansion.
Let's do it.
Yeah, it'd be bloody interesting. I'm picturing the Don GPT of portfolio support.
That would, it's like, just call a therapist. But who was it that we caught up with? Kirk, what was his company?
Leap sheep.
Yeah, so Kirk Leap Sheep, he's taking content from YC and all over the world and creating a similar kind of thing, because at the early stage, I think he's correct. The advice is pretty well the same. There are some common patterns of success. There's common patterns of failure. I believe as you end up in the scale up phase, it gets a bit more bespoke, but I think that's where we're heading. And so over time, I think these kinds of things are going to pop up everywhere. So what's an accelerator actually going to do? It's going to have to be all about community, networks, relationships, capital, in my view. The content is going to go to zero.
Totally agree. Totally agree.
Now, I did warn you a few Easter eggs. Another thing I found that I think is related to the sales. Just hold it a minute, my darling wife. Hey, Maggie. Yeah, Maggie's going to join us for the podcast on the floor. Come over here.
Woohoo! Hey, Maggie.
Say hi.
Hi.
Okay. So one of the things we find, like a bit back to you've got to be able to sell. Sometimes technical founders spend a bit too much time creating the product itself. And we've said a couple of times on the podcast, if you're not embarrassed when you first launch, you've waited too long. But the other thing that accelerators probably can't do for you is to make sure that you're incredibly action orientated. You take action and you pick up the phone. And this is an oldie, but a goodie from Steve Jobs that I think talks to that. So I'll just play this.
Most people don't get those experiences. They never ask. I've never found anybody that didn't want to help me if I asked them for help. I always call him up. I called up, this will date me, but I called up Bill Hewlett when I was 12 years old, and he lived in Palo Alto. His number was still in the phone book, and he answered the phone himself. Yes. Hi, I'm Steve Jobs. I'm 12 years old. I'm a student in high school, and I want to build a frequency counter. And I was wondering if you had any spare parts I could have. And he laughed, and he gave me the spare parts to build this frequency counter, and he gave me a job that summer in Hewlett Packard, working on the assembly line, putting nuts and bolts together on frequency counters. He got me a job in the place that built them. And I was in heaven. And I've never found anyone who said no or hung up the phone when I called. I just asked. And when people ask me, I try to be as responsive to pay that debt of gratitude back. Most people never pick up the phone and call. Most people never ask. And that's what separates sometimes the people that do things from the people that just dream about them. You got to act, and you've got to be willing to fail. You've got to be willing to crash and burn with people on the phone, with starting a company, with whatever. If you're afraid of failing, you won't get very far.
So that's an oldie, but a goodie.
So
An
good.
accelerator can't solve that for you.
So good. And it is interesting, like in a world where information isn't just accessible in milliseconds, but it can actually be interpreted, digested with ChatGPT and AI. It is interesting, like how much opportunity is there for just first principles thinking and actually just going out and working shit out.
100%. And that's, you need to be able to code for this accelerator, but just submit that you need to be able to do a whole lot of other things.
Yeah.
Can you indulge me with one other little Easter egg? You know how we keep, or at least I keep saying though, that coding is going to zero, or the technological stuff will go to zero, and it's going to, this isn't totally saying that it's not. This is concentrating on people thinking the cost and the demand for development might go down just because AI is going to make it a lot cheaper. I saw this during the week that this is an interesting little paradox shared by Mark Andreessen.
All-in costs for like building new software companies are a mirage. And the reason for that is this thing in economics called the Jevons paradox, which I'm going to read from Wikipedia. So the Jevons paradox occurs when technological progress increases the efficiency with which a resource is used, right? Reducing the amount of that resource necessary for any one use. But the falling cost induces increases in demand, right? Elasticity, enough that the resource use overall is increased rather than reduced.
Yeah,
right? And so
that's certainly possible.
and so this is versions of this. For example, you build a new freeway and it actually makes traffic jams worse. right? Because basically what happens is, oh, it's great. Now there's more roads. Now we can have more people live here. We can have more people. We can make these companies bigger. And now there's more traffic than ever. And now the traffic's even worse. Or you saw the classic example during the Industrial Revolution, coal consumption. As the price of coal drops, people use so much more coal that actually the overall consumption actually increased. Well, and people are getting a lot more power, but the result was the use of a lot more coal in the paradox. And so the paradox here would be, yes, the cost of developing any given piece of software falls, but the reaction to that is a massive surge of demand for software capabilities. And so the result of that actually is, although it looks like starting software companies, the price is going to fall. Actually, it's going to happen. It's going to rise for the high quality reason that you're going to be able to do so much more.
Yeah.
With software, the products are going to be so much better, and the roadmap is going to be so amazing of the things you can do, and the customers are going to be so happy with it that they're going to want more and more. So the result of it, and by the way, another example of Jevons paradox playing out in another related industry is Hollywood. CGI, in theory, should have reduced the price of making movies. In reality, has increased it because audience expectations went up.
Yeah.
And now you go to a Hollywood movie and it's wall-to-wall CGI. And movies are more expensive to make than ever. And so the result of it, but the result in Hollywood is at least much more, let's say, visually elaborate movies. Whether they're better or not is another question, but like much more visually elaborate, compelling, visually stunning movies through CGI. The version here would be much better software.
Yeah.
Like radically better software to the end user, which causes end users to want a lot more software, which causes actually the price of development to rise.
So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, just an interesting paradox. And it partly aligns with my worldview that whenever people are expecting something to happen, the total opposite happens. That's
Completely.
just the way, that's the way my life works.
Those two aspects, software becoming more embedded in more things. Look at an automobile now compared to even 10, or my first car, I had zero software compared to
Your first car was when they were called automobiles.
Yeah. My first car was a 1972 Toyota BJ40. But yeah, and then combine that absolutely with customer expectations. Like you can see what he's saying playing true.
Anything else on that, Jack?
No, nothing to add on that.
Now, one of the things with an accelerator or even a GPT is it gives advice. A little thing I saw on Twitter. In 1998, Bill Gates had 2 billion shares of Microsoft when it was the world's most valuable firm. If he held, he'd be worth $806 billion. And he'd be wealthier than the top 4 current richest people combined. Instead, Warren Buffett advised him to give most of it away, and now he's only worth $150 billion. Lesson, never ask for advice.
That was costly advice. Difference of what, 600 and something billion?
Tongue in cheek, obviously.
Absolutely.
Keeping on the advice theme and now blending it, advice plus comedy. Someone that dishes out quite often hilarious advice is Rain Ong, aka Ryan Wong, if I'm not getting my names. And he put out a post probably 10 days ago now, and he was talking about this criticism that people level at Australian VCs of being too conservative. Did you see that one?
Yeah, I love this post. I just love the fact every time, I know I've said this before, but every time I read one of his posts, it's right on that borderline of, is this satirical or is this actual reality? Because the nature of the world we live and operate in, those two things are not easily distinguishable.
Yeah. So the post says, when you have financial freedom, you can afford to take more risk. When you have FU level of wealth, your risk appetite usually scales accordingly. Why are Australian VCs so conservative? In my humble opinion, that's because most of the managers don't yet have fuck you level of wealth. And if they mess up their first fund, that's the end of their VC career. For those who are not happy with the conservatism, I encourage you to raise a $10 to $50 million fund, commit 5 years of your life to run it, and invest the money like you're already in the 3 Comma Club. Don't just sit there and complain. When we get more unicorn and dragon outcomes, there will be more FU ventures and more FU angels. Don't worry. Note, this post is not based on any hard data, just a gut feeling.
I love it.
I love that he's putting the little trademark symbol under FU.
Yeah. FU.
It's a great name for a VC fund.
Yeah. It is true though. We're one of those ones that are emerging. If you fuck everything up, you don't get a second chance. This isn't 2021.
No, 100%. And it generated some commentary, right? Like there was some good engagement on the back of that.
Yeah. And then some other people in the ecosystem, Claire Bristow from Scalata, she did a post saying, I'm about to jump on a plane to the US, but before I'm completely drunk on the Silicon Valley Kool-Aid, I've seen a lot of commentary around slamming Australian VCs for being conservative / risk adverse and that the US is so much better. I've actually also said this a bunch too, which I'm now finding really annoying by me. Reflecting on this sentiment, I don't think it's helpful at all. No. Reflecting on this sentiment, I don't think it's helpful at all. She goes on in the post just to talk about Silicon Valley started in the 70s. We've started a lot later. Silicon Valley is home to 700 unicorns right now. Australia, it's about 9. We're severely limited by a small pool of LPs who invest funds as well as companies to invest in. Is there room for growth? Of course. Are there lessons that can be learned from established markets? Absolutely. But Australia versus US as it currently stands is a silly comparison. And that's, I think, absolutely true as well.
100% true. Yeah, I've heard this these criticisms of the Australian investment landscape a lot in terms of round sizes, valuations, time to complete deals, this criticism that's levied at Aussie investors that they don't get it and it's easier to go raise capital in other markets. But having spent a lot of time in those markets and taking founders to those markets, there's a lot of nuances that are missed. And definitely the history of Silicon Valley, the head start and the evolution they have, but also just market size. When you're investing in an Australian company in the size of our market and what needs to then happen and the risk associated with that to go to a global market of the size of the US or of the UK, there's a lot of risks in that. And there are different models that I do see in Silicon Valley being used by startups where, for example, there's startups there that are being built purely for acquisition of their tech, nothing else. They'll never commercialize the product. They already know that Tesla has a computer vision problem, for example, a very specific use case, and they're solving for that very specific use case to be acquired by Tesla. Now, those sort of models can't happen, or at least not as easily, from Australia because we don't have that connectivity. We're not there in Silicon Valley alongside Tesla's R&D unit. And so there are different nuances of just geographical location that do play out in what we see here as well.
When we've had a few successes, we'll join Rain at FU Ventures.
Free Comic Club.
The sentiment there is VCs are risk adverse. There's a couple of articles and posts that came out. So I think we can keep the VCs are, we'll keep it going. They're risk adverse and biased.
Mm-hmm.
There was an article out by Kate Burgess on Capital Brief talking about former wildlife scientists Camille Goldstone Henry and Jada Anderson, who have built a biodiversity data platform for environmentalists and academics. Then realized the platform could be adapted for use in a corporate setting. Xylo Systems, which is the company, was developed in tandem with the rollout of TNFD. Now, what TNFD is the Task Force on Nature-Related Financial Disclosures. It's a regulatory framework that is coming out. Xylo now caters almost exclusively to property developers who are seeking to understand and rectify the impact that land clearing and other development activities are having on biodiversity and ecosystems in the area. So they did an interview with Kate, and Kate said in this interview, she discusses navigating unconscious biases in the male-dominated tech industry and convincing risk-adverse Australian investors of the potential massive market opportunity of the biodiversity data industry. So there's that risk-adverse theme again. So I'll put the article in the show notes. It's a long interview, a long form one for people to have a look at. There's a few sort of questions and answers that I thought might be relevant just in our space and giving some perspectives. So one of the questions was, what challenges have you faced in setting up and growing your business? And have any of them been existential? And the answer was, as a high growth startup, capital is the be all and the end all for global growth companies like ours. We've been through a pre-seed raise and we're currently going through a $2 million seed raise and are all very well aware that the statistics on the amount of investment and funding that goes to female founders, not just in this country, but everywhere, are really dismal. So we've had to be on our A game and be hyper prepared compared to our male counterparts when it comes to fundraising, just so we don't have any doubts in our minds when we talk to VCs, because we know there are already unconscious biases involved in those conversations. 70% of the investors we speak to are men, so we're always trying to be 5 steps ahead to make sure that those biases don't come out to play. This is also a new market, so we're trying to convince them that we are the right team to do it as a double female founded team and that it's going to be a huge market. So that Yeah, we've spoken about it a number of times, and coming back to the Cut Through Ventures report, they report on investment into female founders, and I think we could agree the numbers are dismal.
Absolutely. Numbers are dismal. They're dismal globally. And are there unconscious biases? It's a watch out for us as ex-founders, operators, and it's why we use Don's color-coded spreadsheets to help analyze deals and try and remove some of our natural biases. But those biases play out across a whole spectrum of stuff. Pattern recognition of our own past lives with different things we've built, experiences working with different companies previously.
We're trying to do the best we can, appreciating, there's 3 males on this podcast, but we're a function of our deal flow. Are there ways that we could improve the deal flow that we're getting to have more female founders? I think so. That's why we're trying to connect with a lot of female accelerators, a lot of female-focused investors. But the reality is, at this point in time, our deal flow, male versus female, is just outnumbered. That's just one of the things. In the podcast with Lucy Wark that we did, we talked about some of this, and Lucy pointed out with Melanie Perkins from Canva, there's a curve fit that could occur there. I guess it's the way we look at Canva is more the complementary team of both Mel and Cliff. I think any one of them individually without the other, I don't think Canva exists. The perspectives that they bring, the energies that they bring, complementary teams is what we're certainly biased towards. I'll totally admit any listener to this podcast knows that I'm biased towards complementary teams. That's not to say that when a sole founder can demonstrate an ability to understand the necessity of complementary and has the attributes to hire and find and engage and retain complementary that we don't do sole founder investments. We do. We've got a portfolio full of sole founders. And one of the other things that comes to mind is because of the rightful focus on improving the results of female founder investment. Well, why? Well, there's no shortage of data sets and reports and studies that demonstrates that high participation leads to greater returns. This isn't just about being the right thing to do. Whether it's at the founding level or the executive level, there's just a lot of reports and case studies that demonstrates that it improves returns. So it's a good business decision as well. Now, not every company that has a female founder then also has the attributes required to achieve some of those successful outcomes. I mean, if it was that easy, there would be a lot more companies achieving the levels of great returns. But for the ones that have achieved the outcomes and therefore did have all of the different attributes, time and time again, the data is supportive of female founders and female participation, providing that complementary team is a very good investment decision.
Yeah, we've spoken about this on a number of previous podcasts about the data after data from different studies showing the commercial benefits of backing female founder teams, and same with boards that have good complementary teams across genders and other demographics. I was just looking at our participant list for our offsite this weekend, and I hadn't actually looked at the numbers, to be honest, but we have 50-50 female-male split attending the retreat.
So the article then went on, what are some of the unconscious biases that you've found investors have? And I found this interesting because I'm not sure this is a bias, but anyway, you can tell me. When you look at the market, we've had such a range of reactions to our calculations on how big this market can be. And the number one piece of feedback we get, particularly from male investors, is they just don't believe that the market is going to be that big, despite the fact that I prepared a 10-page report. I'm a scientist and I have sources up the wazoo substantiating how I'm qualifying this, and they still don't believe me. I think a lot of investors are going off what happened in the carbon market. The majority won't come on board until the legislation comes in. But I don't think that's necessarily true. We've seen most companies around the world set net zero targets before they even came to legislation. And I think it's actually moving a lot quicker for nature. So I don't think what's happened in the carbon market can necessarily be applied to what's happening in the nature market. So when I had read the heading, what are some of the unconscious biases that I've found from investors? I thought that the traditional answers are more around what people think it takes and style and all sorts of different things. Investors not believing their size of market numbers. I guess what's being said, it's because I'm a woman putting forward the numbers. If a man was putting forward the numbers, then we would be believed. And that could be the experience with those investors. And if that's the case, that is a shitty situation, a shitty outcome. I guess what I can say for men and women founders that pitch us, would it be an overestimation to say 99% of the size of market calculations we see, we don't believe?
Oh, I'd say 100%. Yeah. And look, I don't know the nuances of this particular venture and the 10-page report and all those caveats, but I can't think of any market sizing that we've seen in a pitch that we've believed.
And I think it comes down to the way it's done is just often, oh, this is a $10 billion market, taking into account every dollar in that overall market. But Jack, can you give a quick summary of how we look at it?
Yeah, I think what founders get wrong is they just give you the size of the sector. They don't actually tell you the size of the actual market they're going after. So yeah, we use Ed from Octopus's calculation of a bottom-up TAM, and it's just multiplying your annual subscription or the annual cost times by the number of customers. And then that gives you your TAM, and it's just a bottom-up. But quite often we just see it always a top-down size of the sector, which isn't very helpful for us.
Yeah, and I can only go by what's in this article. And so it says that it was originally built as a data platform for environmentalists and academics. So the way we would look at the size of the market is how many environmental and academics are in your target market? What do you charge? That is the total addressable market. Now, then it went in that they've pivoted by the sounds of it for a corporate setting and is now catering exclusively to property developers who are seeking to understand and rectify the impact of land clearing and other development activities. It's now our TAM on this particular thing, it's property developers, but it's a subset of property developers. It's property developers that do broadacre land clearing. I've got a project on the go at the moment where we're going to be knocking down some trees and doing some offsets. So I'm definitely going to look at this platform. But the subset is property developers that do that kind of development and who are interested in that stuff. I don't know if many people have interacted with a lot of property developers. Nature isn't often the top of their worldview, even though that's not the right approach. And so to us, we'd be looking and say, okay, how many property developers are there doing broadacre land clearing that have a need for this? In the article, they say, we're like Canva, but for this. I don't know a huge amount, but that doesn't strike me as anywhere near, say, the number of users potentially that could use Canva. So we disbelieve female and male equally because it's just often presented in a manner, it's a $10 billion market. No, how many potential customers do you have? Oh, 10,000. How much do you charge? Oh, 1,000. Okay, that times that. That's the total addressable market. Who are your competitors? Is it a winner take all kind of thing? If you get 5% of the market, 10% of the market, that's where a lot of the conflict is. Now, in this situation, if they've been pitching to men and if they get the vibe that I'm being dismissed because of my sex, that is a shitty situation. And I hope that's not the case. If it's, I've given billion-dollar figures, a 10-page report, and you being a scientist ain't going to change that.
Yeah, I was a little bit surprised by the 10-page report comment. That should be a pretty short exercise. Now, maybe that 10 pages went into detail around specific customer profiles and other things, and that would be quite interesting. And again, not knowing the nuances or the detail of this one. But just in that next piece, talking about the carbon market, and again, look, it's not a market I know, but the reference to legislative changes and regulations coming in as being a driver, that to me is a separate issue to the market sizing. This is actually looking at what's going to compel buyers to actually make the purchase. And so that to me is quite a distinct point from market sizing.
And what I'm hearing is that there's some pushback coming that's saying it's not regulation yet, and therefore there isn't the impetus to move. And what the founders are saying, we don't need regulation for people to do the right thing. And there's some examples of people taking action. We've got an investment that in the ID space that is regulation in New Zealand, that's regulation in the UK. It's not yet regulation in Australia. And what we've learned is there's a shitload of money laundering that goes through Australia because we don't actually have regulation around strong identity checks. But Aussies refuse to do the right thing quite often until there's regulation. And so reading that, I've got direct experience that if with the carbon market, the pattern was large parts of the market didn't take action until this became regulation, I get the founder enthusiasm saying That doesn't need to be the case. But in our experience, Aussies wait for bloody regulation. It's just, it's a challenge.
Yeah.
So anyway, the founder journey is difficult. It's frustrating.
And especially when you're doing something that's actually beneficial to the planet and the world, and you're driven by that. What I'm thinking of is that is one should, and how these circles don't often overlap.
Totally. What is the situation? What do we want it to be? And what should it be? And they rarely do. I wish them all the best. I am going to have a look at it. Like I say, we've got a development in the family office where we've got to knock down some trees for 160 lots there. Could be something, but just, I don't know, make sure that the attribution of why something is not working out for you is correct. Because if the real reason is a different reason, you can end up spinning your wheels. Any thoughts from you, Jack?
No, nothing extra to add there.
So let's keep the VC is going. VC is risk adverse, biased, and stupid and lazy. There was a post by Jason. So Jason's the head of SASTA, is that right, Jack?
Yeah.
Yep.
So he did this post that really set the cat amongst the pigeons. I was sent a funding deck the other day, and it was an almost. The growth was almost good enough. The space was interesting, but not quite hot. The logos were good. The story had some interest, albeit not compelling. The team looked committed, but nothing stood out. It was an almost. And then I looked at the deck and it said March 2024, not May. And it might sound like small, but it was a sign fundraising has been hard, a sign that for sure I wasn't their first choice, a sign of a lack of attention to detail, and detail matters, a sign not to do the meeting. When it's an almost, little flags like this and you move on, you don't take the meeting. Holy moly, did
Bloody
that
hell.
blow up? One guy, VC is irrational. The fact that Jason took the time to articulate why the value proposition of a real company is useless because the calendar date shows the problem. The problem is not the deck or the group that put it together. Do better, Jason. And that's one of 50,000. So what do we think of these little signals and signs? Jack?
Oh, I was just laughing. How about the sign off? Do better, Jason. Far out. Look, I actually agree with what Jason is saying. This is an almost, and we don't have an infinite amount of time to read pitch decks. If it's a certain that you want to jump straight on a call, you're going to do it regardless of a small signal. But he's phrasing this as an almost. So there hasn't been enough things jump out at him that makes him think, I need to have a call right now. And then when you look like that signal of March to May, that is a clear signal. Like to me, that straight away, you go straight to fundraising.
Is it fair? Probably not. If they're coming in cold, especially if there hasn't been a relationship developed, these little signals become important.
I agree with the little signals. A couple of nuances in this one for me. I think if that was the sole measure, that would be a lazy investor that just looked at a signal like that. But the fact that he gave reasoning that this wasn't compelling and this was just yet another confirmatory signal for him, I totally get that. I think a good investor would look beyond something like a date stamp to the rest of the business fundamentals, which he did clearly outline. He did first. He looked at all the other fundamentals first. But this is an interesting point for me. We talk a lot in the ecosystem about unconscious biases, but there are massive conscious biases that we carry that are really bloody clear and they're bloody painful. And yes, do we want it to be that way? To your point, Don, is it fair? No, probably not. But again, is one should. There is a reality. We may not like it, but there is a reality of VCs getting so many pitch decks and looking for, whether it's pattern recognition, looking for signals, and little signals actually do matter.
I think, though, would it be fair to say with where we are in the life cycle, and it's something Jack has spoken about a number of times, is that every pitch deck has a greater than zero chance of being a unicorn. It might be minuscule, but where we are, we do take the time. If it's within our lane, and it's within our thesis, we will often warn the founder that actually we might have some challenges, but still willing to have a chat. If it's not in our lane, we're very quick to not even, we got pitched a dating app the other day, and that's just not, unless it's a B2B dating app, but no such thing, I don't think. Would that be a fair call, Jack?
Yeah, definitely agree, Don. And I think just to provide some context why, it's because we believe majority of the conviction comes from the pitch call, and we assume most pitch decks are shit. So that's the reasoning why we like to have a low threshold of jumping on a call and then confirming or seeing whether or not we agree with our original thoughts.
And Jason's got a different level of deal flow, a niche national market, so he's going to have some time and scale barriers that we don't have.
That's why I think it's fucking ridiculous that he's getting called out. This man would be flooded with cold inbounds. He's done 8 cold inbound investments that have turned to unicorns, and he's still getting called out for being a lazy investor. This guy has such a high threshold to get a meeting. He's got so many signals he's got to look for after he analyzes the fundamentals.
Yeah. But I think there's just multiple points there, but details, just go out of your way to make sure that the little details aren't unintended triggers. And like on a deck, even if the date is right, if the financial actuals are a quarter or two behind, I know that's an old deck.
100%. Like,
Yeah.
this is for the people that don't have the top tier growth rate or the top tier like alumni from X companies. So you've got to do everything you can to give yourself the best chance to get the meeting. So as a founder, if you haven't got the top tier, it's on you to make sure everything else is polished. Make sure your problem statement solution is so clear, because you don't have that top tier growth rate to then get the meeting regardless.
I think for founders as well, it's a reminder that like the half-life of an investment round, it's an exponential curve. Like the longer you are unable to secure a lead, these are signals that other investors look at. The longer to close your round, the longer to get your reporting updated and the latest figures in your deck, all these sort of things, they are signals that we look at.
Yeah. But then we can be contradictory sometimes. So
I was about to say, look at our portfolio. How many are we the last check in on a round that's been open for?
It's not to say that we take the lead from other investors, because one of the things we've actually learned pretty quickly is that it's really lazy to follow someone's brand, especially the bigger the VCs are, they can lose a lot more than us. Often the bigger they are, the less they actually do in terms of portfolio support. Often it's more financial types rather than operator types. So when I say following other investors, it's more about having a pool of people that can help this company continue to raise into the future.
Absolutely. But again, I think it's like signal to noise. So we can see signals, but a lazy investor would purely just look at a data point and not go deeper. Whereas a good investor goes deeper. And yeah, I think Harry Stebbings' comment there, heat of a round is a signal, but it's not necessarily a positive signal. You've got to go deeper.
Yeah, I think 2021, early 22 taught people that. We covered a lot of ground there. Shall we get into some charts?
I think we have to. I feel like we should have the Seinfeld little opening jingle for your chart session.
Bow, 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 bow. That one?
Yeah, that one.
But done properly. Let me just share my screen. So in the last episode, I'd randomly put forward a chart around the fact that oil tanker spills continue to decrease. And Aaron had some questions and found his own charts.
Yeah, but your screen is currently showing your LinkedIn.
No, I can see charts.
Oh, really? What? Come on. All right. Yeah, so after Don's chart of declining oil tanker leaks and environmental catastrophes, I was curious as to whether the oil tanking rates had actually decreased. And that's what was showing in the data, or as in we were just shipping more through pipelines. But no, it turns out the transportation of oil by sea is at the highest rates ever. So we've just become much safer with our sea transportation of oil.
Can you hear my goats in the background sounding like they're being murdered out of interest, or is the microphone?
No.
Just hold on. Fucking hell. What's the freak goats? Sorry, Aaron, I killed the vibe.
Go after that.
So I found this little chart. So this is like the mean and median, and then also the gray area for the 80th to 20th percentile for Chinese copper stock levels back to 2007. So you can see the median and the mean tracks pretty well from the beginning of the year throughout the year. But this year, so normally at this point in time, things would be dipping down and we'd be having an average of, say, 20,000 metric tons. But this chart just keeps roughly going up and to the right, and we're sitting at over 50,000 metric tons, which means that the Chinese are hoarding. They're either like the price of copper is going through the roof again. It's really strengthening, which tells me that inflation ain't coming down. But in an environment where copper is getting more expensive, Chinese copper levels are going through the roof in terms of stockpiling.
Or is the stockpiling driving the price?
Maybe. It's just interesting that that's a big change versus the last, 15, 16 years. Random. And then speaking of materials, so this is a little chart by Michael Jackson, the venture capitalist, put up a chart here. Let me zoom in a little bit just so it's a bit bigger. So this is the time it takes for materials to get out of the lab and then into like full-time application. And so what's It's just interesting how long it takes. Carbon nanotubes were first invented and designed in 1991, but it's really until last year that they really started to take off. Lithium ion batteries, it's actually 1965. And it wasn't until 2005 that they really started to get into a high volume production. Carbon fiber was 1958. That's really taken decades to come through. Teflon was first invented in 1938. It was 1961 that like high volumes of production occurred. Engineered practice. So it's just interesting how long things from first getting in the universities or wherever they were designed to actually mass use, which I think is a little bit of an indictment on just the commercialization processes of good products.
Yeah, it's super interesting. Not sure what to do with that information, but super interesting.
So why would you ever ask that question at this segment of the show? There's ever been anything to do. What was one of the really nice bits of feedback? It was just the random but often useless charts.
Yeah.
Karen. What do I do with that information? You just take it in. You'll be at a dinner party. You'll be cooking a steak on Teflon and there'll be some guy there. Do you realize that Teflon was invented in like 1938, but didn't really like
most angel investors are just investing for the barbecue conversation anyway, right? So
exactly.
You've given me lots of barbecue fodder.
So this is the total chart of VC dollars invest in AI companies globally, and it's up and to the right. It was obviously 0 to 5% back in the day, but it's now reaching 25 to 30%, which I was probably a little bit surprised about. Just with all the AI hype, I guess I was expecting more, but maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, before I saw this, if you asked me to predict, I would have thought we've actually come off the boil of this a little bit. I thought we'd be seeing the start of the curve change, but I guess it is total invested globally.
Now, this little chart, so this is what was described by the innovation gap. It was by Michael Jackson as well, shared the post, but it's originally from the Financial Times. So this is the number of world-class patents in advanced digital technologies. You can just see that the US, this is going back from 2000. 2000, the US has grown from like a few thousand to nearly 50,000. China really only started to fire off, about 2012, 13? And it's just below 30,000. Then there's Japan, then there's EU, there's South Korea. From an innovation measured by patents, and you've obviously got to be a little bit careful that that's not probably the strongest measure, the US is still outstripping. But if China's rate of growth continues, ain't going to be long till it's the leader.
Yeah, one of the commentaries that was always leveled against China was while their manufacturing and output capability was phenomenal, their IP generation, like unique IP, wasn't as high. So there were questions around durability as the labor force, like wage rates went up. But looking at this, like that IP, if you measure IP, again, the caveat of measuring IP just purely by patents, but if that is the measure, that's phenomenal growth since 2015.
Yeah. Now, what was that laugh for, Jack?
You just can't help yourself and not help yourself.
Speaking of innovation, or at least was innovative, these charts tell a bit of a picture. So this is Tesla. So this is the price of a Model Y. You can see when it started, it was fairly flat when they first came out around that 2020. Then COVID drove the price going up. So between 2021 and late 2022, the prices went from 60,000 to 70,000 for a long range and 50,000 to 65 for a performance, 60 to 70, and for a long range, 50 to 60. But you can just see that they're really starting to drop heavily. We've got the performance one dropping from 70,000 to 55,000. Like these are new cars. So this is all coming out of Tesla's margin, right? So I'm not sure that they're going to be able to make cost savings to maintain margin. There's not just new cars that are dropping like a rock. This is a chart of the used car prices of Teslas going back to Jan 19. And you can just see again the same pattern where it was rising during COVID, reaching 67,000 as an average. But it has fallen from October 2022 from 67,000 down to 31,000. Just the average cost of a used Tesla has just fallen through the floor. I think that's a competition or a combination of things like competition, obsolete technology, Elon doing the best job possible, destroying brand.
Can I just chime in? The last week we heard Don deliver this. I think it was 4 cocktails deep. Totally different delivery.
Yeah, it's totally different.
It was
He's only said the Elon word once this time.
it was like an angry person soliloquy, wasn't it?
I was like, what did Elon do to you in your childhood?
I think I was even referencing the families of people killed and incinerated in Teslas that they couldn't get out of because of the shitty design of their handles and things
Yes.
exploding. And
But on this, you boys know Marin is keen for me to sell the gas guzzling ute and switch to electric. And we've been talking about a Tesla, but you look at the depreciation curve, like both with the new prices dropping, which then pushes the secondary market. There's so much new competition in the market. My justification, Marin, because I know you're a listener, we can't buy a Tesla. It just depreciates too quickly.
And until we get some maybe other people on board, you're fairly key to this company. And I'd rather you didn't die in a full self-driving thing or an immolation because the thing caught on fire. I think one of the things I said last week, wasn't it something I saw online? If you're ever lost in the forest or a desert, just utter the words, Elon Musk is not a genius, and all of these nerds will come from everywhere.
That's right.
To rescue you and then take you back to their car that's probably burst into flames. A lot less unhinged this week. I do have this mass stack of, there's more DOJ investigations coming out. I've got this mass stack of stuff that I'm just keeping, but I'm trying to hold back, Jack.
Well, related to this curve though, did you see that there was a post about the stockpiling of new models coming off the production line, like the Musk having to rent and lease?
Yeah. But it's a robo-taxi, Aaron. We're going to have robo-taxis and your car's going to appreciate.
Wasn't that 2024 that got announced?
No, that was 2020. So then they could do a capital raise. And then, anyway, just read the depositions. For all of the people out there that absolutely love it, just read the depositions. Anyway, we're wasting listeners' time. I was surprised to see this. In the last 10 years, our taxation, the government has collected, what was it? It was about 440 billion 10 years ago, and it's now just tipped over 750 billion. So I didn't realize there'd been such an increase in the tax collected in Australia. Now, why has that been? This is a chart showing our terms of trade, and the terms of trade is the price received for exports versus our imports. That's why Australia is often called the lucky country. And you can just see Australia, we are up and to the right. We've got the stuff that the rest of the world wants, and the price of that stuff has been increasing. That puts us in a very fortunate position that has seen the government's coffers continue to swell. But this next chart is going to be interesting. The green chart is effectively the jobs indicator. Now, the jobs is a combination of vacancies, job ads, and hiring plans. And you can see that just continues to fall. It's not in negative territory, but you can see how this just swings like a bit of a sine curve. It died at the beginning of COVID. It went up, obviously, with the COVID-driven splurges, and then it's just been dripping down. Now, the blue chart is the unemployment rate or the employment growth rate. And you can see that both of those things tend to match. So with the jobs leading indicator continuing to fall, if this trend continues to play out like it's historically played out, our employment growth is going to continue to fall and we may start to end up in negative territory. So just something to watch out. So this is the dark blue chart is single B versus double Bs, the spread between B debt and double B debt. Then the light blue chart is the versus single B and triple C debt. So triple C being worse quality than Bs. And so what's happening here is normally this follows each other, but what we're starting to see is that the shittier debt, so triple C debt, is starting to command a higher yield. The spread is getting greater. Now, that has historically been around times when that debt starts to get higher. When the shittier debt starts to get higher pricing, it means something is happening in that market for investors to want to demand higher spreads. So it's going to be interesting because if that's the case, then that what tends to happen is that pulls the other debt markets up as well. This could be one of those canary in the coal mine things, not sure, but interesting. And this sort of US credit spread versus the Fed funds rate, that still hasn't broken as yet. That is still a 3-decade low is what we're seeing there. But what we do see, so there's two charts here. One is the spread between the 10-year yield and the corporate spreads. The chart below is what the Fed fund rates do. and we've had such a rapid increase in Fed fund rates from 0 to 5.5. Once that fund rate goes flat, it tends to start to fall fairly quickly. The challenge is there's nothing in the market that we're seeing where there's things starting to crack. That previous chart may be one of those things, but at the moment, at least, the credit spreads versus Fed funds rate is not a canary in the coal mine screaming anything is wrong. They're still at 3-decade lows. This is a chart of GameStop, just to end. GameStop, are you aware, like doubled on a day last week? GameStop.
No, I've not been following
the
it
original
recently,
meme. Remember the whole meme mania?
Yeah. Look at that, May 2024.
Yeah. So do you know why?
Nope.
Do you remember Roaring Kitty?
Yeah.
He just posted this, just a single thing. A dude in a chair leaning back, and then the dude's leaning forward, like seriously playing a game with a game controller. That's all he posted. Minutes later, all of his followers, so he got 84,000 likes, because this guy, Roaring Kitty, Keith, whatever his name is, was hold the whole Converse. He was the GameStop guy. He was the guy that's credited with driving it. They were like, he's back. So they all started buying up GameStop and doubled the price in a matter of fucking hours.
Far out.
You want to tell me that humans are rational?
Yeah. Far out.
So we're going to end on that irrationality.
Very fitting.
It's almost like a double episode for missing last week's episode.
It is. We cover some of the ground that we missed.
I think you
Right
two
in
are
there.
probably preferring the shorter drunk version than the longer drawn out version, but anyway.
Look, it was entertaining for us. Probably not so valuable for listeners. We probably did them a favor.
What are we looking forward to? Can I start?
Yes. Go.
I smoked my first brisket on the weekend, so I'm sliding more and more into that phase. And
I tried some yesterday. That was pretty
yes,
good.
you did. I put another one on at 7 a.m. this morning.
Before you know it, you're going to be catering this weekend at the offsite.
If I wasn't bringing the caravan, so for listeners, Jack and I, to keep the cost down, are sharing my caravan at the offsite on the top of a mountain. Should we go? I think we'll go right to the top of the hill, Jack. Get the elevated view.
Yeah.
Get
that driveway's done. Yeah. Go for it.
Couple of candles. If I wasn't bringing the caravan, Aaron, I would tow the smoker.
Yeah. I've got the trailer with all the other stuff. Yeah. All right. We probably can't do that this time.
No. Of course, the big thing we're looking forward to is the offsite.
How big is it, Don? That's my car.
2 people to carry it and wheel it around needs a trailer.
Yeah.
18 kilos of meat or something. I don't know when I'd ever need that. It's automated. So what you do is you press the button and it's got the hopper and whatever else. And so you put it on and then it changes the temperature for you. And in about 3 hours from now, I'll go and wrap it in foil.
Love it.
Pretty schmick setup. So you're looking forward to eating meat and going to the offsite.
Talk about not being probably qualified to talk on gender diversity issues and stuff. Anyway, what about you guys?
Jack, what are you looking forward to?
The offsite. So flying up Thursday and then Don picking me up Friday morning. Looking forward to it.
Yeah. Oh, that's what I'm looking forward to. I can't wait.
What's the weather like?
Good.
Forecast is blue sky. Oh, no, not blue skies. A bit cloudy, a bit overcast, but dry.
But what's good is it's not going to be steaming. I think we've agreed we're never doing one in February again, yeah? We just can't. I just can't emotionally handle it.
I don't think it's the month. I think it's just whenever Tribe has an event,
Yeah.
the weather just turns it on.
Yes. So there's a difference between the forecast and what Tribe delivers.
Yeah. The last one of these, literally a tornado came through and tore everything and ripped our marquees down.
Yeah. In the middle of our spit roast with about 40 investors, something like that, 40 of us. Oh, I can't wait. It's going to be a ripper.
And then we're doing a lot of London prep. We've got a number of deals on the go at the moment and some portfolio support. I won't mention their name, but that big insurer that, remember, pulled the pin on one of our portfolios.
Yeah.
The founder called me last night. They're back.
Yes. Of course they are.
So it's the strategy of not throwing your toys out of the cot and burning bridges. Sometimes they just need time.
That's
That
awesome.
is awesome. That is bloody awesome. And learned too for that founder. That's bloody awesome.
Yeah.
Ripper. Shout out. It's Laney Stead's birthday today.
Oh, that's just in there a
Happy
message.
birthday, Laney.
Happy birthday.
Awesome. We have so much to do. We probably should crack on and get shit done.
Yeah. And given the length of this, it's going to take a while to edit up.
Recording on a Tuesday to get a head start in the editing. And I think you meant more than you can chew.
I only got myself to blame. All right. See you soon.
See you
Cheers,
guys.
boys.